if you sort out our food system, you sort out everything else. And to me, it was like, oh, hallelujah, thank you, Professor, because that's what I was sensing, and I was believing, but I was believing that from my own little self point of view.
Hi, I'm Kirsty Gilchrist, your host of Brave Conversations, a series of conversations with people who have chosen to be brave in their lives. Through 20 years working with leaders and organisations, I've learned that the world needs brave people. Those brave enough to reflect and admit they might be scared, but act anyway. Brave enough to challenge what isn't working. Brave enough to choose possibility even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. So, if you've been waiting for permission to make a change or wondering if you have what it takes, this is for you.
So, hello, Marie-Amelie Viatte. It is absolutely wonderful that you're here today. Thank you for joining me on Brave Conversations. This is very exciting. I'm going to do a little intro for you. So, you're an advocate for regenerative localised food ecosystems, founder of Sowing Our Horizons, an invitation to reconnect with food growing in our cities and towns and join hands to resource it differently. So, Marie-Amelie, you've also created the Power of Food Festival, Edinburgh's Festival of Community Food Growing, and is trustee of the Grant Community Gardeners. Your career has straddled environmental issues and health and social inequalities, mainly in policy and funding focused roles in the UK and overseas. And food has been a recurring theme throughout, I realise. We've known each other for a few years and we just reconnected. I've actually signed up as an investor in Sowing Our Horizons because I was so excited. Do you want to let people know, first of all, we'll just so that people understand what that concept is, and then we can explore other bits?
Sure. Well, hello, everyone who's listening. And a big thank you, Kirsty, for inviting me to talk on this podcast series. So in a nutshell, Sowing Our Horizons, as you said, is an invitation for us all to reconnect with our food. We've become very disconnected from it. And that's partly because most of us live in urban environments and food typically is produced in far away, distant and invisible places. So Sowing Our Horizons invites us to reconnect with it here in the urban environment, on our doorsteps, and indeed to put hands to resource it really quite differently. So it's a little bit like a meaningful alternative to carbon offsets. And yeah, we've got now a circle of 45 investing companions, including yourself and including 2 businesses. It's open to individuals as well as organizations to join in. And we are working with one first ecosystem of work in the north of Edinburgh, made up of Lauriston Farm, the Granton Community Gardeners, which I've had, as you said, a long-standing relationship with, and the Scrum Academy. And we are investing together in their collective effort and collective impact.
So, do you want to explain just how you see that working? So how that works at the moment and the reason for it, and then also, as this grows, how you see and the why behind it, really.
Yeah, the why is multifaceted because what I've just said is, sounds quite straightforward. It sounds like another charity, right? But it isn't a charity. And that's also part of the why we're doing what we are doing. So the way it works is, first of all, why is it needed? Well, it's needed because, as I said, we are very disconnected from our food, and our food system has been allowed to become really a source of many problems. It's obviously still feeding us, but it's very, very fragile. It's articulated along extremely long supply chains that go all over the world. And we are very unaware of the stories behind these very long supply chains. We don't tend to know where our food comes from. There are many reports of children who don't even understand the potato comes from the ground. The global food system is the single largest contributor to climate change, the single largest contributor to biodiversity loss as well, and indeed the single largest contributor to poor human health. So it is a massively problematic thing. Many people are trying to wrestle with how to fix it. For my part, I've been witnessing for a long time now what is going on my doorstep, really. And it's the micro scale. It's really what's happening through people actually often feeling food insecurity firsthand, and or watching their neighbours in their neighbourhood struggle with accessing food and accessing nourishing food, and deciding to do something about it. And there is a myriad of different ways, but what's particularly inspired me is the growing bit, because obviously if we don't grow food, then there's nothing to eat. So we need to grow a lot more of what we eat, and we need to eat a lot more of what we grow. And that's true at a country level, and it's also true at a local level, and indeed at an individual level. So we can actually make first attempts at growing a few things on our windowsill. We can get involved with community food growing projects or an allotment, or indeed we can also take part in larger scale food production and indeed other parts of the food system. So it's not just the growing, right? We need to grow and more, because, if you think about all the steps involved to get the food that you've got on your plate, to get it there, it's more than what comes out of the land. So there are many opportunities to get involved in Edinburgh and in our neighbourhoods and communities in general. But those projects are doing amazing work with very, very little resources. And that's really problematic, because as far as I'm concerned, they're like our insurance policy, right? Our collective insurance policy for the world of tomorrow. I mean, even for the world of today, we have experienced pandemic. Sadly, as we record here today, we are seeing devastating war, yet another one unleashed not very far from here. And because we live in a global world, anything that we need relies on things happening far away. So yes, the work that's going on our doorstep that is extremely impactful and is transforming lives and transforming communities needs to be resourced adequately. It's currently relying on a huge amount of volunteer work, even though there's a lot of demand for actually paid work in this sector. And if it's not voluntary work, it's very poorly paid work, which for a lot of people is not even a possibility, because they have bills to pay. And not just that, but it's also very insecure, and it's not even given due regard in terms of its strategic significance for our resilience locally and nationally. So for all those reasons, we need to reconnect with it and invest in it, and we need to invest in it differently. That's where Sowing Our Horizons.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's brilliant, and it is absolutely pertinent right now. I mean, the UK has always had an issue with food insecurity, which, like you say, we noticed during COVID and empty shelves. We now have a war going on. We have no idea how much that may escalate. And urban environments, even more so than rural environments, are really, need to be as resourceful as possible. So this is another reason why I'm very excited about Sowing Our Horizons. Can you illustrate? So the business model, it's a bit of a carbon offset. So we can invest some money, and that's a social investment as opposed to looking for any financial return. But what can you illustrate how you see that happening, and when this grows as your vision has, depending on your vision, what does that look like? How does it sustain itself without being a charity?
Yeah. So that's not easy. So first of all, to say that it's a meaningful alternative to a carbon offset, which means it's not a carbon offset. So sorry for contradicting you as you've just said that. But I understand why you've said that, because we have purposefully linked it to flying. So that's why we refer to it, because people do tend to say, oh, it's like a carbon offset. So I was resisting that very much, because I think carbon offsetting is very problematic, very reductionistic, led to all sorts of new problems arising. It's become an industry and not one necessarily for good. I mean, there will be good actors in there, no doubt, but there are also lots of problems with it, and it's simplistic. So it's a meaningful alternative. It does link to flying. Many people feel like, oh my God, I'm flying. This is so bad for the climate. but I want to go on holidays, or well, I have to do that for work or whatever. And then they get a bit stuck because they feel a bit like paralyzed by the guilt and by the, like, what do I do about this? And indeed, that's something I've experienced myself, and it's partly how this has come about. And so, while yes, flying is very problematic when we do it willy-nilly without really thinking about it, it is the most intensive in terms of carbon emissions sort of activity we might take part in. Actually, food is the single largest contributor to climate change, as I was saying earlier. And we all need to eat. Like, we don't all need to fly. And many, many people are not flying, and a few people are flying a lot. But we all need to eat. So there's a link to be made there. And also, if we talk about a meaningful alternative to carbon offset, it's because it's very dear to me to localize our impact. So, we might feel very negatively about many, many things that we do through our consumption that, we know ultimately carry a negative impact. And it's often very distant. And so we somehow manage to turn a blind eye to it and brush it under the carpet because it makes us feel uncomfortable. And I would like us to start to be more brave, to look at that pain, actually, look at the binds that we all are living in, because nobody's pure, nobody's perfect. This is not the end of the game. But we do have a responsibility, and instead of feeling guilty and paralyzed about it, we can turn to it, give ourselves kindness and compassion, and realize that we also have agency. We have far more agency than we often want to believe, because once you think you have agency, you can decide about it. And that agency, can be exercised, best exercised locally, because then you get the rewards. So that's why it's an alternative, meaningful alternative to carbon offset, very focused on the local piece, because instead of putting money towards trees, good tree plantations, great. Not so good tree plantations, not so great. Often trees that never visit, you'll never hug, you'll never feel the presence of, you may or may not know even where they are. Instead of all of that, we can say, okay, we feel the challenge, and we want to do something positive, and we want to do it here where we are, where we live, and we want to be able to get the rewards from it. And that's why the invitation is framed in this way. It's not just to put money in the pot, but to also reconnect with what's happening locally.
How does that become sustainable? So this is a food ecosystem that you're looking to help develop, isn't it? It's not just growers, it's actually a whole ecosystem that you want to do. So how does that work?
Yeah, so that word ecosystem is close to my heart. I did ecology way back at university a few years ago. And we talked about ecosystems, of course, in ecology. And nowadays, everyone seems to be talking about an ecosystem. Well, I guess I should rejoice for that. But for me, it's always been something close to my heart, because I really see connections in my life and in everything, really. And an ecosystem is basically this. It's an expression of relationships between different parts of a whole and how they fit in together in relation to each other. And so to answer your question about where is this going? Well, we are part of the ecosystem, as people who want to flow resources into it and want to reconnect with it. We are part of the ecosystem. And the first location in which we are working is North Edinburgh, as I said. As you said, indeed, the investment is not for one organization at a time, it's for an ecosystem of work. And that's important because this is a bit complex, perhaps, but in a way, it's very simple. The mainstream food system sells food which, on the face of it, on the price tag, is very cheap, really. I know it's not cheap for many people. I know that many people struggle to afford food. But in terms of true cost, it's very cheap, and it's full of hidden cost. and actually is very costly. It's very cheap, but it's very costly. And that mainstream food systems means that those actors who are trying to do good work through food really struggle to compete effectively, really. So they will often be seen to be expensive, and even so in our ecosystem, we've got a social enterprise catering organization, which is also a youth organization. That's the Scrum Academy. And they have a range of income sources, including a lot of grant money. And their resources are actually very limited to buy the best of food that really aligns with their values. And so they rely, because of resources, but also because of availability, actually nearby, availability for the things that they need. They rely on the main wholesalers to sell them stuff. And that's, that they're doing great stuff through food. But if we're really wanting to change the economics of it, we need to start to enable those who buy food to buy it from those who are producing the best of food for their communities. And that's where I started to see an opportunity, is to enable this tiny ecosystem of 3 organizations at the moment to start to be customers of each other. And what I envisage, and this is a bit blue sky thinking, I do believe that if we put our mind to it and we join hands and hearts, we really can make it happen. At scale, what we can do is to start to forge much more circular local food economies where the different actors can actually be in less of a charitable kind of relationship, although, charitable work is very important and will carry on happening, but also start to have more of an economic and a healthy economic, a different kind of economic relationship between them. For that to happen, we need to effectively subsidize them. They're not helped by the market, and they're not helped by the authorities. Even agricultural subsidies don't touch them because they're far too small to be helped by food growing subsidies, never mind any other kind of subsidies. So that's the idea, is that we invest in that kind of synergy at a local level. And for that to be realized, so the other part of that ecosystem is how the money comes in, right? So at the moment, so far we've raised about £7,000, over a couple of years. So it's very, very, very small, and that's completely fine. It's like baby steps. It's tentative. We can come back to that. But at scale, if you think about it, like if you do a sort of, back of a fag packet kind of calculation, if you have 10% of people traveling through Edinburgh Airport give £5, 10% of them give £5, you have £8 million a year to start to invest in a much more regenerative way and in a much more self-sustaining way to create those kinds of new synergies. And that's not just in Edinburgh. We could do that, in lots of localities. So that's the sort of idea, really. We need to really move towards that. And I felt, therefore, that this is not charity. This is about our food system. We have to make this work. And it's not a nice to have. It's not something for the poor people over there, however much they need our help. Although they're, I don't like that expression, poor people, anyway. It's very condescending to some extent, that kind of way of thinking. So I think that we need to be part of this, and that's why we need to join hands, and that's where we need to flow resources together.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. And like I say, given, poverty is huge, and food insecurity, and even more so the insecurity that's happening right now, as we're saying. So if you had to articulate your philosophy in one sentence, what drives everything that you do as Marie-Amelie?
Yeah, so I love that question, actually. I think there is something that underpins. There's 2 things, but there's the one main thing that's been with me for quite a long time, actually. I came up with this a little bit like by chance, but it's really, really stuck because it was so aligned with who I am and how I see things and how I do things. And that's the phrase "connected by nature." And, it was not far off 15 years ago, I think, that I first had this, connected by nature. That's like my professional name or my second name or my tagline or whatever it is. And that's, I mean, it's, what do you understand, Kirsty, by that connected by nature? In a way, it's it says what it says on the tin.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I know that certainly it's one of the things that when we've been growing the Brave Collective, it's something about connecting to self, connecting to each other, and then connecting to the planet. I am absolutely connecting to nature is so key because it is, we're part of nature as well, even though many of us don't think so. But yeah, I absolutely think so. And so that's what's sort of driving you in terms of that nature, and that's about the growing of the food, isn't it, as well as eating it. So yeah.
And it's really connected by nature is sort of what it says on the tin, but it there's a layer underneath that as well, which is like, well, personally, I'm someone who loves connecting with other people and loves to make connections between people, and also who sees connections between issues and maybe the work of different organizations, whatever. But that connecting piece is really quite a part of me and of my offer. And I am very aware that in sustaining myself, nature is a key part of it. And I feel very connected to nature. And then the other thing is, like, we are all connected by nature, or it is in our nature to be connected.
Yes.
It is in
human nature. Yeah.
It is human nature and beyond human nature to be hyper connected. So, there's quite a lot in all of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's brilliant. So really, I know that you have sort of taken an unconventional path in the last few years. You've had a salaried position and were working in policy, influencing to a certain extent, but also in different communities. And over the last couple of years, you just had this idea and you've gone with it, which I think is absolutely amazing. What moment made you realize you couldn't stay on the conventional path anymore?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, because it's more with the benefit of hindsight that you see that, as you journey along. There hasn't been a moment when I thought, oh my God, I need to leave the conventional path. Although actually over my career, I think people, it's funny, like people see it more than I see it myself.
Yeah.
So I then, when I look back, so, I left the Scottish government many, many years ago after about 10 years working there. And people thought I was mad. I was leaving without another job. I was leaving all the security and the pension and blah, 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 blah that job gave me. And, actually, I think it really challenged people. I got quite a lot of almost pushback, or people said, "You're so naive." And I'm like, well, I don't know. Why am I naive? Anyway, so the point is that I don't realize this is a moment in time when I make a change. But over the last few years, so since I left Inspiring Scotland, where we were colleagues, you and I, and where I'd spent nearly 10 years doing work that I really loved, which, sadly came to an end because of funding issues, I decided that I would focus on food, because food had been a recurring theme. You mentioned the Power of Food Festival. That was set up exactly at the same time. I set that up at the same time as I started working for Inspiring Scotland. So nearly 10 years later, I had really spent quite a bit of time thinking about local food growing, and I had seen food as a recurring negative problem throughout my career, environmental issues, social and health inequality issues. And then I started seeing food as totally the catalyst for positive change. And when I left Inspiring Scotland, I thought, okay, I really need to focus on food and put that at the heart of my work now going forward. And, it's not easy to decide to do that, because, there's plenty of people who graduate in food policy or who've been doing food focused stuff for many, many years. And although I had quite quite a knowledge of it, quite an experience of it to some extent, on paper, it was pretty difficult. But anyway, I had a very strong hunch that I wanted to manage a flow of resources into urban food growing. And I wanted to do this kind of place-based investment. And I wanted to be tasked with, here's a pot of money, you look after it, you do that, let's experiment. How can we do that, a bit differently? And I was hoping that those who fund, health work or environmental issues or community stuff, or, there's so many things that get addressed through community food growing. I was hoping that one of those funders would be like, oh yeah, we've been thinking about that. Absolutely, let's have a go. But no, that didn't come. So, so after about 6 months of being very keen on and sort of determined really to find salaried work. And by the way, I'm still trying to find some salaried work if I can fit it into my busy life or freelance work. Then I started to think, well, maybe this is it. Maybe the call here is to do it ourselves. Is that we need to look at our own pains. And I mentioned flying, and at that point, I was about to go on a long haul flight for the first time in many, many years, and I was talking to others about what do they do about that, and everyone was like, "I don't do anything, and please don't talk to me about it because I feel so bad." And then I had Johan Rockstrom, who's one of the IPCC scientists, give a big lecture to a very fine audience in Edinburgh, and it was very gloomy, partly because Storm Babette, if you remember, Storm Babette was hitting our windows outside, pretty much literally. And at the same time as that storm was unraveling, he was depicting on his screen with his slides a very bleak picture of climate change. And then he sort of paused and he said, well, you can look at all of that and you can think about our energy transition. And indeed, we need to, reduce our reliance on fossil fuel and change the way we produce energy. But really, if there's one thing we need to do is to tackle the food system. If you sort out our food system, you sort out everything else. And to me, it was like, oh, hallelujah, thank you, Professor, because that's what I was sensing, and I was believing, but I was believing that from my own little self point of view. And then to hear him say that at the same time as I've been struggling with this idea of, okay, where is this ready-made pot of money? And I'm going on a fly, and then everything sort of coalesced like a beautiful constellation in the Storm Babette sky. And I thought, well, okay, let's get off the conventional path and let's have a go at creating something ourselves, and in quite a different way.
Yeah, because I love it, because I think that we've both been in the funding world and liaising with governments, etc. And I think that it's very easy to get in. This is the way things happen. This is the way things are. This is the way that you approach them, and therefore we can't really look at somebody who's doing something slightly differently. And I don't know if you agree, but there's a freedom when you just go, oh, well, okay, I've now got that belief that I'm doing the right thing, so I'm just going to do this. And then nobody other than the people who we're doing this with actually have any input in it. So we're just going to do it and play with it and everything else. So I really love that. And I mean, for me, because I'm always a big one about challenging the status quo. Is there anything else? What does the status quo look like to you? Is that a fair representation, or what would you say the status quo is that you're kind of challenging?
Yeah, no, totally. And I love what you've just said. I think we do put ourselves under straitjackets because, the way things are is the way things have been and the way things will be. And this is what we're doing, and I'm like, no, can you not see the massive cracks in the wall? We need to completely stop doing the way we've done things. And our famous quotes around that, if you keep doing the same thing, you can't expect a different result. And we need to liberate ourselves, actually. And you're right, it is a real freedom. I mean, it's a very vulnerable freedom, because when you liberate yourself, you typically go off on your own, and for me, from the word go, I'm not going off on my own. This is going to be a collective, but even if it is a collective, I've been out on my own trying to make the case for this, really. And bit by bit, more and more people like yourself, thank you, are starting to see that, we can really start to see things differently. But there is a freedom, it's fragile, it's vulnerable, and yet the status quo is very problematic. So, I mean, the status quo for me is like ski run. It's like you're on the ski run, you go up and down. Everyone knows the way to go up, to come down. But ultimately, it's like lots of people overtaking you in a sort of race to the bottom, really. I mean, literally on a ski run, but also figuratively. And that's not what we want. So my invitation is to go off piste. I started talking about that a few years ago, actually, in Link Up with Inspiring Scotland. We were talking about that. We need to go off piste. We need to do things differently. And going off piste is not easy. It's full of risks, and it's full of rewards. And that's the point of it, is like, if you stay on the ski run, you know what you're doing. You're going up and down. You've been there before. You know the outcomes, you know the ingredients, you know the landscape. But if you go off piste, you're going on an adventure, and you can discover new landscapes, and you might be, going through pretty tough terrain, and going on your own is not a good plan. But if you persevere, you might be able to circumvent different obstacles, and then you might suddenly come to this amazing viewpoint or clearing, or it's that the magic is there. It's not on the ski run that everyone knows. You need to get off piste.
Yeah, I really, really love that analogy. I think it's so important. And actually linked to that, what do you think, I suppose, as you were going off piste and when you'd had that kind of moment, listening to that talk and going, actually, this completely resonates. What do you think? What were you risking most when you decided to pursue this? And actually, has it been a risk? I suppose what I'm asking is, what fear might you have been seeing as a risk, and now do you feel that being off piste at the moment has been the right way to go?
Oh, yeah, I love it. Look, I'm not a skier, so although I use that
Neither
analogy,
am I. I'm like a giraffe that's just newborn giraffe whose legs just go everywhere. So yeah.
So I have no experience of literally going off piste with skis. But yeah, in terms of the risks, well, again, it's interesting. So we've said on a few occasions during this conversation that it's been 2 years. And it's true, it's been 2 years since I first got going. The very first step was like, just start, So how do I just start with this idea? Well, I just started by putting it on GoFundMe, and I started inviting people to sort of chip in. And it's been less than a year since we've actually incorporated. So it is very early stages. And the risk and the fears, yeah, they're very alive. Actually, they're very alive today. Even just saying that, I feel them in my tummy. It's like there's so much beauty going off east, but it's scary. You do have a lot of losses. The one I mean, there's the obvious loss of income, right? Because, instead of getting a salaried job where I was paid to take those risks to experiment, well, it's been on my head, really. So there's obviously that. And while that's quite significant, because with that, there's also a sense of, well, if I'm not paid to do this, then surely it doesn't really matter. So there's a real jackal there about, oh, this isn't significant. Yeah, and justification because I'm not paid for it. So that's tricky, and to some extent status, or at least a sort of ready-made existence, right? That goes, and that's pretty scary. So it's a bit of a loss of identity, a loss of belonging, a loss of community, and also a loss of actually day to day, a loss of structure, a loss of any kind of predictability or certainty. I mean, the world is uncertain always, and we kid ourselves in thinking we've got any control over any aspect of it. Yet when you are in a salaried job, you know that you're turning up at the office, you know that there will be colleagues there, you'll know you'll have a break for coffee and you'll chat to people, you'll know you'll have a paycheck at the end of the day, you'll know you'll have meetings along the way, you'll know you have, my manager who'll support you, and suddenly all of that just goes. And every day I spend so much of my energy day by day, week by week, creating structure in my head, trying to take just one thing at a time when they are all jumbling in there and nobody's saying, okay, Marie-Amelie, so what have you gone on this week? It's like, so that's actually one of the biggest risks. It's almost a psychological, emotional burden or labor that comes with it. And of course, with all of this, because, this is not proven itself, very far from it. It's this tiny seed that has germinated, but it's very, very tender and small seedling still. So with all of that, there's like constant sort of ebb and flow of, yes, we're doing this. And then what am I doing? I'm completely crazy and I'm exhausted.
But there must
So
be something within there, though, that is keeping you going. So that spark,
yes,
that food, that
yes.
thread, so what do you think is enabling you to actually go, when it does? I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, and that is one of the things, again, we do in the Brave Collective. It's that kind of accountability, because it's like you're having to prioritize, and then you're suddenly thinking, why am I doing this? Actually, could I be doing something else? And then there's what is it for you that brings you back to go, no, I'm doing this right. I'm on the right track of the off-piste track.
Well, again, it's other people, so sometimes you're off piste. And, if we carry on with this lovely analogy, I feel that there's a little children's story that should be written here. But sometimes you're off piste and you're like close knit and you're taking one step at a time together and you're like almost elbow to elbow and you're really securing each other and you're looking at the ground together, or you've come to a beautiful viewpoint and you're sharing the glory of that. And you're really close, and that feels like, oh, this is so beautiful, because we're progressing, we're going somewhere together. We're not quite sure where, but we're enjoying the journey. We're together. And then at other times, you're going off piste, and you've had to sort of take slightly different. Well, they're not paths because we're off piste, but you have to go slightly different directions to circumvent an obstacle or something like that. And then suddenly, your group of 5 or 10, they're quite distant one from the other. And then you're a bit on your own, and you're like, oh no, how do I get over this, whatever it is in my way? And then, hey, over there, are you okay? And you can't even speak to each other. And so that's the pool, the ebb and flow again. And so what brings me back? It is when we, actually find ourselves back again, like elbow to elbow, and we build this into Sowing Our Horizons. I've built this into my week, during the season. Every Tuesday morning, I'm at Boriston Farm at the Market Garden. I've decided that I've made that part of my job description for Sowing Our Horizons, even though I don't have a job description, obviously. But, this is very important to get grounded and to be nourished by that inspirational work, which Brilliant. I'm also here to serve. And to be with others. You don't know anything about Sowing Our Horizons, although as soon as they start talking to me, they will. But anyway, and they're there and they're rejoicing, and I see the amazing impact that this work is having. Not my work, but the work of others is having on the community. So that is, I get nourished by getting out there, cycling there, being in the fresh air, moving my body, blah, 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 doing something meaningful. And I get extremely nourished by seeing others being, others' nourishment, and others being nourished by it. And so, sort of generally speaking, I get inspired by the work of others and feeling like if I can contribute to that, and especially if I can enable others to join me in contributing to that, wow, that is powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what inspired me to invest, or to sort of give something, because it's like, actually, you're developing a framework, a structure from which something amazing could grow and is so needed. And I think that's really exciting. And yeah. So what status quo assumptions did you have to unlearn then before you could challenge it?
even that word unlearning, that was part of it. So I didn't even realize that that was a word and that they were going to be things to be unlearned. And I did the upfront course, Lauren Carey's amazing upfront. There's a plug for upfront. And there was a lot of focus on unlearning in this. And that just came at the right time for me to really question, what was it that was holding me back in my idea of myself almost. And I think I that this is not just again a point in time. This is a continuous sort of process. We need to unlearn a lot to relearn differently, including our relationship with money, and including what we tell ourselves, as I was saying a bit earlier, about if my work's not paid. I mean, like, I would never say that to someone else. This is the crazy thing, for a long time, I've very much valued other people's unpaid work. And indeed, with the Power Food Festival, we made a point of being moneyless, really, because we wanted to be harnessing what people's gifts are beyond what they've got in their pocket. So I for a long time, I've held money at a bit of a distance, really. But when it came to me and my idea of self-worth, just a sense of, if I'm not paid, like, nobody will take me seriously, was and continues to be quite tricky. And then how do you introduce yourself? What do you say when people say, what do you do? And then I have to say, I'm a business owner. Oh my God, I still can't say that.
Then you just
Language,
say,
it's
I'm
not.
changing the world, Marie-Amelie. What do you mean I'm a business owner? I am changing the world.
That sounds far, far, far too heavy for my little shoulders to carry. I think there's something about language. I think actually that is quite a key thing about unlearning is uh, apprehending language differently, and seeing how even that word investment, like, again, that's something that, I'm going to have to probably do some kind of FAQs on our website, because that word uh, sort of, it's misleading for most people, but it's not misleading. It's like we're actually using the word for what it means, but we have to unlearn how we've been told to use it and what it means. Like, it's like, investing is not just putting your money here in some kind of transactional way for some kind of greater financial return further down the line with whatever's happened in between. That's one aspect of investment, but investing is a much broader thing. So yeah, I think unlearning is a whole thing around language and attitude that comes with that.
Yeah. No, I completely understand that. It's interesting because as I was developing the theory of brave and the whole concept of choosing brave, I'm really listening to what you're saying, and there is something about, it's that kind of dancing into the hope and the possibility rather than sitting in fear, and that unlearning is quite a lot of that, because you're sort of having to deconstruct what you've imagined everything should be. But you don't have to be a particular person to actually choose to be brave, or in a particular way, or how you're being. I think it's actually one foot in front of the other and just keeping on going, but being really anchored in what you're doing, which it feels that you are. I mean, have you got any practices or principles that keep you going when you're feeling particularly vulnerable in this sense?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's very fragile. I mean, I I I lean on my husband a lot, and he has been, absolutely a key part of that. Very much in the background, totally invisible. Would not even want me to talk about him, but yeah, I lean on him a lot. And what do I do for myself? Well, I've really, in that same period of time, there's been various life events that have happened, including losing my dad, and quite complicated stuff going on in my personal life, which have I guess, called me towards learning to sit with myself a bit more. So I guess you might call that meditation. I am slightly reluctant to call it like that because I feel I'm such a newbie still that, to say I practice meditation sounds very grand. But I have learnt bit by bit, I've gravitated towards it. And bit by bit, I've leaned into it more. And now I make a point every morning of actually sitting, by my big house plant with my cup of tea in silence, listening to this lovely little meditation video or a few of them, and then doing a bit of movement as well on the back of that. And that's a daily thing. And I think that has very much helped. And then another thing that's always been part of my life for much longer than this is to move and to get out. So I never really start a working day before having first gone for a walk or indeed a cycle if I'm off to a meeting or an event. That used to be part of our normal, working lives as we used to commute to place, office or whatever. But nowadays, we tend to be so much more sedentary, and I'm terrified about that because of its health impact and just how it makes me feel. So, getting out first thing in the morning, absolutely key. Ideally, another time during the day as well. And when I do that, I try to seek nature, and I'm lucky to have lots of gorgeous nature around me, even in this beautiful city. And then the other thing is like, when it's a mental sort of, flat, what do I do? I try to sort of lean into the idea of impermanence, remind myself of this kind of wisdom around serenity, um, and courage and wisdom. So the serenity to accept what you can't change, the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two. I have been wishing everyone this year as we embarked on this year, and I have been practicing this day to day. And then I also have started recently, and this is a much more recent thing, to do some free writing, and that's really proving quite powerful, actually. So when I feel like it's all accelerating a bit too much, and I'm like, what do I do today? What do I do? It's like, actually stop. And I remember a former colleague of mine, whom you know, Paul, who used to talk about that as well. And thank you, Paul, if you're listening to this, because you first sowed that seed. When it all goes too fast, just stop, and absolutely stop. And for me, it's like stop in various ways, including this free writing stuff, which allows everything that's in my mind to just flow out like a dump. And then I just entrust it to the page, and I feel so much lighter, and often new insights come out. So that's very powerful. And then at the end, I get out and I go horse riding, and I'm very lucky. I borrow someone's horse and I get out into the woods and all that. So these are the things, this various practices that I do day by day, week by week, that try to anchor me.
So what would you say to someone listening to this? What would you want someone listening to this to do differently tomorrow?
Yeah, and actually picking up right off from what you've just said, looking after ourselves is the first absolutely key thing we need to do. And I remember another colleague, who's now one of our co-directors, dear Sarah, waving to you, who quite a few years ago shared an academic article with me, which was pointing out that the biggest challenge or risk, really, the biggest risk to social change was burnout. And very aware of that at the time, especially in others, a little bit in myself, but more so in others. And I've become more and more aware of that. And indeed, with the work that we do through Sowing Our Horizons, if we are talking about regenerative work on the ground, regenerative food ecosystems, we need to make sure that we resource ourselves as well in a regenerative way. And so looking after ourselves day by day is critical to everything else. So that's the first thing I would say to people that they may want to do differently, is make sure to really find whatever it is that works for you, but make a commitment to yourself that come what may, you will take time for yourself. And then the other thing I would say is honor your food, because we're so much in a rush always. We tend to overlook really what's between our fork and our knife and what we put in our mouths. And yet, if we honor it, we start to ponder it, I guess, and we can start to wonder about it and dream about it. And I do believe that, what you appreciate appreciates. So once we start honoring our food, we might start to feel that it gives us more. For a start, if you honor it, you slow down. And if you slow down when you eat, you'll get more out of it.
So, what do you wish someone told you when you first started out? And that could be when you first started out on Sowing Our Horizons, or when you first started out actually on the food journey. You choose.
When I first started out, yeah. I think when I first started out, probably more generally, actually, because it applies to everything. Um, it's something like, don't assume it's your responsibility to shoulder it. And while it's good to aim for the moon, um, don't make this your first trip hazard, because, aiming to be over ambitious or over just asking too much of yourself and taking on more than is actually your responsibility really undermines your capacity. So, yeah, I think there is something, I think we all actually tend to think it's our responsibility, and not just our responsibility, our sole responsibility, us on our own to whatever. You have that responsibility, we have that responsibility. So let's be a bit more in the we rather than in the I, because then we can just be like, whew, I can breathe a bit more, and I can say, how are you getting on with this bit of your responsibility? Can I help you? And can you help me? And, it can be lighter, and it's also opening up, permission to others to ask, for shared responsibility. And I
I
think
absolutely love that. I think that that's so important. And I really, that really resonates with me as well in terms of how I've seen or I've actually done myself. And it does, a collective responsibility is so much healthier, isn't it, when it comes to that?
yeah.
So I was talking before in terms of the theory of brave and choosing to be brave and sitting between hope and possibility against the fear and potential loss. If you were to look at the brave scales, where do you think you would be on those of hope and possibility versus fear and loss? Where are you on that balance right now?
Mm. Well, I just love the way you phrase and frame things. It's so cool. It's really good. So, there's just so much going on in people's lives out of fear and fear of potential loss and all of that. And I am someone who I think is quite driven by hope and possibility. And I think for as long as we keep that alive, we keep going. And if we give up on it, we descend really. So into very dark places. So I very much hold the candle of hope and possibility. And for me personally, well, it very much changes day by day. I mean, as you'll have picked up from this conversation, there are many tides or ebb and flow, or whatever the analogy might be here. It changes day by day. And I do notice that it doesn't take much to knock me off, but then it takes even less to boost me again. So that's nice.
It is a dance,
and
isn't it? It's an absolute dance, isn't it?
it's absolutely a dance. And it's interesting you put it like this, because when the dance is a solo dance for a bit too long, that's when I get knocked off and I lose my step. And then if the dance goes back to being an exchange, then absolutely I get boosted again. So, I mean, today I'm feeling great because we're having this conversation, and I feel so grateful. I'm really, really grateful because this is what nourishes me. People taking an interest, people also yearning for doing things differently, people sort of searching, yearning, supporting one another. This is definitely the fuel that takes me forward. So,
Yeah,
feeling good
well, I
today.
think it's so exciting because just as we come to a close, and for listeners, you have a wealth of experience. This has been, as we've talked, a huge thread throughout your life. You've worked in different communities. You can see how ecosystems fit from looking at a helicopter view right from being actually on the ground, and therefore what you have developed is all of your experience into one, and being able to look at this, and I just think it's a wonderful thing and really exciting. So if anybody would like to look at what you're doing, what's your website? Is Sowing Our Horizons
Org.
your .org. Okay, I'll put that into the show notes as well. And please do have a look at the website. I think if you're interested in food networks, food security, ecosystems, etc., particularly in urban areas, I think this is really, really valuable. So, Marie-Amelie, thank you for this chat, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Take care.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. And please, everyone, do seek us out. Find me on LinkedIn, find our website, and connect and join us if you'd like. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.